Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this, which is our first virtual sea angling forum of 2022. And so we're going to start this year with a little chat with Jamie Cook, who's the CEO of the Angling Trust. And for those people who don't know me, I'm Stuart Singleton-White, and I'm the head of campaigns here at the Angling Trust. And in the background with me tonight is Nevin Hunter, who's the marine coordinator and is running all the technical sort of bits in the background. And we have Hannah Rudd, who is our policy and advocacy manager and is also a marine scientist. And Hannah will be helping to coordinate the questions this evening. And will be also here available to support Jamie and myself in answering the scientific and technical aspects of our work in sea angling. So before we get over to Jamie, I'll just explain how the evening is going to run. So the first thing to mention is obviously we're using Teams this evening. We're using it in the webinar mode, which means that all of your cameras or most of your cameras and your microphones are currently switched off. We're recording this session this evening, so if you don't want to be sort of recorded or on video at any time, then by all means keep your camera and your microphone switched off. But we're recording it because we then post it onto our website, so anybody who can't be with us this evening can view this at their leisure in the coming days and weeks. I'm going to start the evening by handing over to Nevin Hunter for a while, who's going to give you a little bit of information about the sea angling forums, particularly how well we got on with them last year, the sort of topics we covered. So if you've not been at a sea angling forum before, you get an idea and a feel for what we talk about and what we discuss during these forums. And if you're that excited, you can go back and view them all on our website. So, do please do that. When Nevin's done his short introduction there, we'll come back to me and Jamie, and we'll have a chat and a Q&A session. We've asked for questions to be submitted in advance, and we've had a few in, so we'll start probably with those questions. If you have any questions, I'd ask you to use the chat function on Teams. You can find that if you look at the top of your Teams sort of setup, there's a little icon which is like a speech bubble, and if you click on that, you'll open up the chat function and you can chat. You can tap in a question there, which Hannah will be monitoring, and will be able to either ask the question, or if you want to ask that question yourself, just indicate and Hannah can open up the floor to you to ask the question. And when we've exhausted that process, if we've still got time and we're still interested, you can put your hand up, and we can also just ask questions through people putting their hands up. So that's how the evening is going to run. We'll probably continue the conversation till about 8, 8:30, see how we're getting on. And then at the end, I'll come back to thank you all and to tell you what plans we've got for the rest of this year. So that's me finished. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Nevin. And Nevin, do you want to take the floor and tell us a little bit about last year's sea angling forums?
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. If I could just as a matter of everybody running everything tonight. Ian Bowell, I think you've got your camera on. Is it possible for you to turn that off, please, just so we're consistent with everybody else, if you can hear me? And I'm just going to share a quick PowerPoint with everybody, so bear with me. Okay, so thanks for the introduction, Stuart. Most of you know me that have been involved with any of the forums that we did last year. And as Stuart said, I'm the marine coordinator for the Angling Trust and have coordinated, all of the forums that we ran. So I'm just going to go through now a short PowerPoint, really just to take you through the findings over the last year, what we've done and how we've done it, and hopefully no more than sort of 10 minutes or so at the most of that. So you may wonder, for those of you not attended, why have we run sea angling forums? Well, in 2019, July 2019, we ran a member survey. And from that, things that you asked us to do were to tell us what you're doing, cover topics of angling interest. There's a lack of understanding of the role of those involved in fisheries related enforcement. 80% of the responders said they preferred a sea newsletter as a means of communication from us. And later in 2019, we started to run a series of face-to-face forums. And as you all know, then we then got hit with the pandemic and the start of that. And much of our work in 2020, as you'll appreciate, across the Angling Trust has been focused on getting everybody back to fishing, as well as dealing with the pandemic issues. And during that time, we looked at how we could move things forward. And the obvious way to us was to propose virtual forums during 2021. So we ran 16 altogether last year, and we looked at a couple of sort of key areas of interest that we thought you'd have. We did an IFCA virtual tour of the English coastline, and you can see all of the different IFCAs that we went around with the chief officers involved, presenting with forums and really good representation around the country. And then linked to that as well, we ran our shark themed forums, and you can see the ones all highlighted in blue there. And then we finished off the year in December last year with the sea angling diary and an input there. So just to cover a few of them quickly. Return of the Blue Shark was the first forum that we ran with Dr. Simon Thomas. Some really good interaction with everybody during that forum, and then we went on to starting the tour with the IFCAs, and the first of those was with the Cornwall IFCA at the middle of February, and it was really well attended and people interested in that. And the next one after that was a spotlight on Paul Beagle sharks. And as some of you will be very aware, Paul Beagle sharks are a real concern to us at the moment with the review under the Wildlife and Countryside Act that's going on. But that was a huge interest to anglers generally. And as I said, we finished off the year with the Sea Angling Diary, and we really would, encourage all of you to get involved, actively involved with fishing, get involved with the Sea Angling Diary. So what have we learned from the forums that we've done over the last year? Initially registering for everybody or a number of people to attend proved quite difficult. We were using Eventbrite as a mechanism for people to register and then actually get onto the forums, and it actually seemed to lead to quite a lot of confusion about how do I link, how do I get into meetings and the like. So we've now gone to a process sort of halfway through the year where you can actually register directly through the Angling Trust website, as you would have done for this forum this evening. That certainly seems to be much more popular with everybody and has made the processes of actually getting into forums easier. So I hope that's working for everybody. But what else have we learned? Using the webinar format works better. We tried different formats for how to deliver. And firstly, it was just a standard Teams meeting that was very bureaucratic for us to do. And then we moved to using the live events, which is the much bigger sort of functionality that you can do with Teams. But they then introduced a webinar format, which for all intents and purposes comes across as a Teams meeting, but actually gives us in the back room, from a producing point of view, more control, and we're able to invite people like yourselves to get involved with asking questions directly, and you'll see that as we go through the evening. You've really liked the recognition by scientists of the role that anglers played in citizen science that we've covered through particularly the shark forums that we've done. You would like more angling related topics covered and to understand the role of regulators. We're going to carry on with that during the course of the year. So, we've got people like the National Mullet Club coming to give a forum for us. The Association of IFCAs in the next few weeks are going to be presenting as well. And it proved really popular with the uploading of the forum recordings to our website. And I'll just show you this slide again, and you can see that really focus on the bottom right hand side there, and you can see that we have 1,200 people registered to attend our forums, and over 2,800 people have actually looked at the forums when we've actually recorded them and put them on. It is YouTube, but you can access them through the Angling Trust website. And here's the page on the C page that says the Virgin Sea Angling Forums. You scroll down that page and you'll be able to see there then, for instance, the one we ran in December with Kieran Hyder and Adam Brown on the Sea Angling project. You just click on it where you've got the little triangle there, and that will go automatically to YouTube, and you can watch that. So all of the forums that we did last year, there is a recording, as there will be of this one tonight, that you're able to look at. and to able to pick up whatever you want to from any of those forums. And of course, the great beauty of YouTube is you can move the through the video as and when you want, and pick out anything that's of interest to yourselves. I mentioned earlier about the free C newsletter, and I thought it's really a really good thing to flag up to you as well. It is free, as these forums are. We send the C newsletter to members with sea angling interests, sea angling clubs, trade, charter boat owners, and other interested party, and that amounts on a monthly basis to about 3,600 participants. But in terms of individual subscribers, the interesting factors there is that since October 2020, when we had 3,300 people who were subscribing and receiving this free email with the newsletter, we've now gone up in January this year to 4,600 people that are actually receiving that every month. So that's another 1,300 people and individual subscribers. As I said, it is free. It's easy to do if none of you actually do that now and subscribe to that. But we can include in that the latest updates, such as you'll see on the Angling Trust website at the moment about the great work that's been done to get the Admiralty Pier open for fishing in 2022. And we're going to highlight these types of issues and any issues that you've really got to us and flag them through the C newsletter. So you can subscribe to the C newsletter again by going on to our C pages. Never miss an update. You'll get that simply by giving us email addresses and filling your details in there. It's free, and every time that we do an update, you will receive that. So I really would encourage everybody to get involved there. And of course, being the Marine Coordinator for the Angling Trust and working closely with sea anglers, of course, I'd love to recommend that everybody gets involved with the Angling Trust and joins us as well. But that's just a quick overview from me of where we've got to in the past year with forums. And can I just stress one last thing from my point of view? Please tell us what you'd like us to consider for the future for forums, because we want to build that program that's of real interest to yourselves. And with that, Stuart, I'll hand back to you. You're muted at the moment.
How not to run a seminar 101 mistake there. So yeah, well, thanks, Nevin. That was really great. And I would just re-stress as well that, as I said, these forums are very much for your benefit, and it's a really important way that we can have conversations. So if there's topics or things you're interested in, do please let us know, and I'll tell you how you can do that at the end of the session this evening. But it's really, really important that we hear what matters to you and what your priorities are. And we'll do our very best to make sure that they're covered by future forums. Anyway, moving on, the main reason why I think we're all here is to hear from and to chat with Jamie. So Jamie, welcome. And I wondered if you wanted to start, before we get into the questions, with just giving us a quick introduction to yourself and sea angling, your views of sea angling.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart, and thanks for the invitation to join. I think I'm one of Nevin's stats of watching these forums back afterwards, and I've really enjoyed some of the discussion and debate. For those who don't know me, and I apologise for the slightly hoarse voice, I'm on day 10 of COVID isolation, so I apologise in advance if I cough or splutter at any point. I joined getting on for 2 years ago now, and recreational sea angling was an area that, when as a lifelong angler and having caught, I think, my first fish on the pier on the Isle of Wight, I understood the pathway that you could take as an angler, regardless of whether you caught your first fish in saltwater or freshwater, regardless of where you lived, that the thrill that you got, the enjoyment you got, was absolutely the same. And so in joining the Angling Trust, it was one of those things that I was keen to understand, was our relationship and association with sea anglers, because I've got friends who are sea anglers, friends who are match anglers, course anglers, carp anglers, and more latterly, more friends who are game anglers. And I think it's fair to say that a couple of years ago, recreational sea anglers were probably fairly a bit disillusioned with the Angling Trust and the commitment it had to them in its structure and its work. Now, don't get me wrong, the campaigns team in particular, led by Stuart and the Marine Advisory Committee, as it was at that point, the volunteers involved had done some fantastic work, and made a real difference. When you look at some of the work that Stephen Murphy and David Curtis had led, and the partnership with the National Mullet Club under Andy Burt, I think there were some really commendable areas. But for me, what I couldn't understand was why, because there was salt in the water, it made the services that the Angling Trust delivered different. It just didn't resonate for me as a general angler why that would be the case. And I understand a bit better now, having been involved for that period of time. There are things that the Angling Trust have historically delivered and continue to deliver which are contracted, which have restrictions on them. But for me, after we got through the When We Fish Again campaign, which I think was a great success for angling as a whole and the organisation, and getting the input of recreational sea anglers and the regularity of contacts I had with some really knowledgeable people, the likes of Dave Lewis, Dave Barr and John Locker, was fantastic in giving a really honest view of what they thought the challenges were and how they were different for sea anglers to coarse and game anglers. We managed to get fishing back and fishing recognised and the benefits associated, and that's caused a sort of a groundswell of support and a feeling and an opportunity for us that if we work together behind a united voice, that actually, firstly, that organisation is open to listening and working with all anglers, but secondly, that decision makers are listening to it as an organisation. And you just, as the case in point at the meeting that Stuart, Nevin and Hannah have been in today with DEFRA, the letter I received on return to work from COVID isolation from Victoria Apprentice, it's absolutely clear that we're having an impact. And it's really surprised me the amount of the time and resource that we as an organisation have put into big issues around the recreational sea angling sector, and I've been really proud of that. And I don't think we've told that story well enough historically. So my perceptions coming in were probably slightly misfounded, and it's been great to learn and see that develop. This year, 2021, I restructured the organisation a little bit, really to ensure that there was no way that you could represent a sector so diverse as the recreational sea angling sector without specialist knowledge. And the problem was with the organisation that we weren't tapping into the specialist knowledge in areas that underpin what the Angling Trust is and does. And if you'll indulge me for a second, I think it's really simple. When I started, the question I heard most regularly was, what does the Angling Trust do? What are you? And I think I distilled it quite simply into 4 key areas that we cover. The first is probably the most familiar to most of you, which is the campaigning element. We fight for fishing and the environment. I saw George Graham's on the call here. Myself and he are both trustees of the ACA Trustee Company. That organisation was formed in 1948, the same year as the NHS, and still lives on through Fish Legal and the Angling Trust. And the campaigns element of what we do to fight for fishing and the environment is incredibly important. And when you look at the implementation of the Fisheries Act, the work that's gone on for years around that and the opportunities it presents, we're already seeing traction in that area, albeit we've had to fight bloody hard for that traction. We're seeing progress, and the officials in some of those organisations are genuinely taking note and listening to what we've got to say, and we're influencing policy and application. Now, we're a not-for-profit organisation, so every penny we generate, we invest back into the sport. I think it's fair to say that if you were to take a profit and loss account of core membership around recreational sea angling versus the amount we invest in it, we actually invest far more resource into recreational sea angling than we take directly from membership at the moment. But I think we've got to play a long game in that respect, because there's probably been a decade where we maybe haven't invested to that level, and as a result we've got to do more, and I'm proud to do so. When you look at the Fisheries Act and the FAS level 1, and there were problems with it, we've made those very clear, and I think our voice has been heard. We as the Angling Trust aren't going to benefit directly from the resource that comes out of the FAS funding. what we're going to have to do is work with community interests, clubs, individual groups in coastal communities to help you to access and tap into those funds for application within your own local communities. It's not there for us as a national governing body to benefit from. It's absolutely clear that it's not. We've been focused in the drafting of why recreational sea angling should be a beneficiary from it, that this money has to find its way to the coastal communities that need it and benefit from it. It's not for us to benefit from, but what we're going to be here to do is support those clubs, those groups, those community interest areas, whether it's infrastructure projects, research projects, whatever it might be. We're going to be trying to support you in those applications. And I think that element around campaigning, and we'll come to questions later, but it's so broad in some of the work that Stuart and Hannah and Nevin and the team have done around the campaigns that they've worked with volunteers on across the country. It could be getting fishing reinstated on Admiralty Pier. It could be around minimum sizes it could be around arguments over bycatch and restrictions on the recreational sector versus the commercial sector. There's a huge amount of knowledge there, and I don't profess to hold that knowledge, but I've got really good people around me within the team who do and who are passionate about these fights. The second key element, I think, in what we do is participation. And I think it's fair to say that over the past half dozen years, because of the nature of funding of angling participation, the focus has naturally drawn itself towards freshwater work. But for me, I wanted that to change. So in the restructure I put in place, the participation team, and there are 7 officers across the country, each of them have a key performance indicator, a target of engagement with sea angling clubs and support of sea angling participation initiatives. Now, we know from the work that we've done that the most successful angling intervention that we've run and continue to run is around family participation. It's a sport that isn't biased. It's universal. The opportunities to participate are fantastic. And I think what I want the team to acknowledge and focus upon, and we've started to do this year, is that there are many people like myself who probably caught their first fish in the sea, whether that was on a holiday. I had family who grew up on the Isle of Wight. I got opportunities to be there regularly, but my course fishing was probably founded in catching that first fish from the sea. And so that pathway to becoming a lifelong angler doesn't have to be focused on where people live. It's more focused on where people enjoy the activity. And so that you'll see more. You've probably seen I hope you've seen a degree of change this year with some good events. You'll see more next year as we continue to invest our core funds from membership into participation in sea angling at a grassroots level. The third pillar for me is probably the one that we've got furthest to go, and I noticed Ian on the call there, is competitions. Through the amalgamation and formation of the Angling Trust way before I joined, there were various bodies delivering sea angling competitions, and National Federation of Sea Anglers as a core. Last year, we appointed a specific officer to develop and build sea angling competitions and events. Now, that process has probably taken longer than I hoped it would, and we're still in that planning process. But my commitment in 2022 and onwards is that we will build, I hope with partners, a really strong, really robust set of sea angling competitions and events that recreational sea anglers of different ilks, different regions across the country as a whole can engage in and enjoy. Because again, for me, that maintaining an angling habit is core to why the Angling Trust exists. And whether it's a competition in a commercial carp fishery, whether it's on a natural venue as a river or a lake in freshwater, whether it's on a loch fishing for trout, or whether it's in the sea, of whatever the style of event, be it charter-based or shore-based, I want us to have a broad-based portfolio so that all within our community have the opportunity to participate at grassroots right the way through to elite level. Now, we're not, and we should be clear, we're not an Olympic sport, we're not a Commonwealth sport, we're not funded by UK Sport for talent or elite participation, so we're having to self-fund. But there are already plans afoot and developments there that I'm trying to push into commercial entities to offer further support and sponsorship to offset and hedge some of that cost for our elite anglers to be able to participate. But for me, it starts right at the point of grassroots engagement, and we know that there are a number of anglers who engage through the competition infrastructure, and it's something that we need to build upon. Now, I'll hold my hands up and be honest, I think we've got a way to go in that area, but the commitment's there, and that's from me right the way through the organisation. And again, that staff member is funded from our core funds to be able to develop offering for our sea angling members. And the final area is probably why we're here, which is knowledge and advice. And it's one of those areas that I think we've probably done more around the freshwater environment historically, but that's changing. We no longer have a freshwater team, we have a fisheries team. And so where clubs need support, be it around access, be it around issues or challenges with IFCAs or with Natural England, our team are there to advise and support. And having specialists in the marine environment such as Nevin and Hannah and generalists, I think it's fair to say, in Stuart, we've got a strong team there. And what we're starting to do is tap into that team that's historically been funded through Environment Agency rod licenses in freshwater to advise freshwater clubs. The perception I'm challenging is, well, why aren't we advising in marine matters as well? Why aren't we doing more there? So I hope you've started to see a degree of a sea change in that respect, but we're on the first steps of a journey. And I think for me, what I'm going to show is the commitments there from me and for the organisation, from the board and the Fish Legal Committee as well, because some of the work that Fish Legal have done in marine environments is critical right the way through the organisation, so that angling's in our DNA. Staff wise, we've got passionate anglers of all denominations involved in what we do, and I can't be more clear in the fact that our commitment is genuine, whether the water's got salt in it or not. We're here to support recreational sea anglers the same as we are freshwater anglers. So for me, I think as we look towards the future, these engagement opportunities are fantastic. Had I not been in the personal situation I was, I'd have been up in the northeast this weekend, and plans were to attend forums up there. You'll see a lot more of us out and about as the world goes back to what the new normal looks like. But the key point is around engagement. As members, we are a membership organisation. We're here to represent our members and the sport as the national governing body, and we'll continue to do so. So, as Nevin said, your feedback's crucial. We'll develop these programmes to hear what you want to hear. And as we move forward, I'm here to answer anything I can for you. As most of you are probably aware, I grew up a course angler. I've done more sea angling the last couple of years than I had for the previous probably 15 or 20. I absolutely love it. I've caught some fish that I'm really proud of this last year. I've caught nothing quite a few times fishing in the Bristol Channel on my own, and I've learned so much from the support of knowledgeable and passionate anglers, not only around the catching of the fish, but the environment they savour and the challenges that are faced. And I think the biggest thing that I've taken away from it is the challenges are so diverse in the marine environment. The challenges that face and the cultures that anglers have in the northeast are very different to in the southwest, and no two regions are identical. So I think having that broad base of, we now have 7 participation officers who work across freshwater and saltwater across the country, and a specialist group centrally supporting them. Please engage with them. I think Dave Munt's on this call actually, and him and Kev up in the northeast are doing a fantastic job. We need to do more to represent those regional communities, and that's why the work that Nevin's done to give recreational anglers a voice and access to the IFCAs, to policymakers and to ourselves to flag issues where you need our support. We'll always be there for our members and for the sport. So for me, sorry to go on a little bit, Stuart, I think that's those sort of core pillars for me of what we're trying to build, the direction we're moving in, and I'm very happy to answer any questions. One thing I should add before I go is, if I ask anyone else to come in on any of the questions. It's not me trying to avoid it. I just simply don't have the depth of knowledge in certain areas that Hannah, Nevin and Stuart do. So if you've got specific questions for me, then I'll always try and answer them. But if they're slightly broader, then I'll bring the other guys in because they're experts in their field. But thank you all for joining and taking the time this evening. I look forward to talking to you all.
Thanks, Jamie. That's great. I hope that's whetted people's appetite for firing some questions at Jamie as we go along. So I do reiterate, if you've got a question, by all means put it in the into the chat box on the thing. We've had a couple in already, but we always welcome more. But before we go to those questions, we did ask for some questions in advance, and I'm pleased to say we've had some, Jamie. So what I'm going to do is start by just running through some of these advanced questions we've got. And the first one came in from Alan Wells. I don't know if
Fisheries Management Scotland.
No, I don't think it's that Alan Wells.
Okay.
But I don't think Alan's on the call this evening. I haven't seen his name so far. Anyway, Alan, if you are, I apologise. But he wanted to know, how's the Angling Trust putting pressure on the government and water companies to deal with river pollution crisis and the impact that this is having on the sea as well?
Well, I mean, Stuart, I'll pass. Let me cover this first, and then I'll let you have a go at this, because the amount of hours between you, me, and Martin that we've spent on this, probably it's lucky we don't bill by hours. I'll give you an example. I had a personal email today, as you'll have probably seen, Stuart, from the Chief Exec of Severn Trent Water, acknowledging the level of campaigning work that the Angling Trust had done through the End Sewage Coalition. We've been a key partner in that respect. The work that you've done with Philip Dunn, and anyone who followed Prime Minister's questions yesterday will have heard Philip Dunn and Jessie Norman expressing their views around the why and pollution there, for example. But as Hannah reminds me every time I speak to her, I think all rivers lead to the sea. And fundamentally, as recreational sea anglers, it's not constrained or restricted. And where I live in Bristol, we know we've got the issues around Hinkley Point, for example, and it's separate from a pollution point, but the impacts that pollution is having globally are issues that we have to fight alongside other partners to address. I think Stuart, I'll let you pick up on the specifics around the work that we've done, but the acknowledgement that, I should say, the Angling Trust and Fish Legal have gained, not so much from the media, but more from policymakers, has been quite refreshing. And I was shared a private note from someone very senior within the government expressing the view that actually maybe the wheels are turning to make a change, and maybe the drum we've been beating alongside others and showing how if we work together to a collective goal, we can make a difference, is starting to drive that motion that we've all desired for so long. So in answer to Alan's question, Stuart, I genuinely think that the feedback I get is we are one of the most active and vocal NGOs in this sphere around pollution. We have been for a long time. The legacy that the ACA and Fish Legal bring to the discussion is significant. But the tactics we've employed, the passion that anglers have shown in contacting their MPs and contacting policymakers where we've asked them to, has been acknowledged. And I'll let you pick up on it, Stuart, because I know it's a passionate area for you. But I think we are doing and having an impact. And whilst there may be challenges around the pace that moves at and whether these words will lead to action, that's what we have to keep our foot to the floor on, because it's the future. And I'm a parent, I've got young kids. I want to see them enjoy the environment that I got to enjoy. And I think we should be leaving it in a better space than we found it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jamie. I mean, I think you've covered it really well. I mean, you're right. You know, we've now had as well for a little over a year our Anglers Against Pollution campaign, which has been really providing us with a focus to drive a lot of these issues forward and build on the legacy that you've set out. And we were instrumental, and it was very much due and thanks to a lot of anglers who got behind that last minute push we did with the Environment Act. When it was sort of going between the House of Lords and the House of Commons, and we were forcing in more commitments around tackling pollution, and we were absolutely central to that work. And I pay tribute to all the anglers who really got behind us for that. But the other key partner we worked with during that process was Surfers Against Sewage, as you've mentioned, and through that End Sewage Pollution Coalition. And it was that combination of surfers and anglers and others who really helped drive that change and showed, the ministers and the government that there's a real political momentum and a real public concern out there. And it is that link between, as you say, particularly, rivers leading to the sea, but also a lot of these sewage outflows. And I'm sure everybody's seen the video of the southern water outflow into Langston Harbour, and that really galvanized a lot of people. And so our Anglers Against Pollution campaign doesn't differentiate between whether it's coastal pollution or it's freshwater or river pollution. We're working on both and driving both. And I think aligned to that, one of the other big litter issues or pollution issues, Jamie, is also litter and marine litter. And one of the early pieces of funding that we have managed to secure out of DEFRA now is to roll out things like our line recycling scheme, or the line recycling scheme that we work with as part of our Anglers Against Pollution campaign into the marine environment. So we'll through this year be getting more and more recycling bins on fishing marks around the coast. We'll be organising more beach cleans, and we're really highlighting the role that anglers play, not only in campaigning to stop pollution, but also in cleaning up their beaches and cleaning up the environment themselves. So yeah, there's a lot we've been doing, but I would reiterate what you said at the end there, which is all we've now managed to secure is commitments on papers and statements from ministers. We've got to actually really drive this forward now, and deliver change on the ground or in the sea, and that's the big challenge that's ahead of us in the years to come.
I think the point you make, Stuart, around Viv and the guys at the National Line Recycling Scheme is a great one, and it comes back to what I touched upon with, we're a not-for-profit organisation. We haven't got the solution to deliver at grassroots everywhere we need to, but if we can work with the right partners, we don't need to. We just need to help them access funding, access opportunities where we can isolate them and make the arguments. And you look at, there are various examples. You look at the brilliant work that Stephen's done with the Bluefin Tuna campaign and the chart programme. Speaking to Stephen, that partnership is key, because the specialist knowledge, the ability to form that argument, it is crucial. But the ability for us to open the right doors and provide the credibility and support that Stephen deserves and carries in that respect, that's why working in partnership is so crucial. That this idea that the Angling Trust need to be all things to all people, we don't. We need to work with the right partners in the right areas. And I think on the final point on that pollution side is, for Alan's question, the fact that Ofwat and the EA have been told specifically to increase their enforcement and their delivery around enforcement is a first step there. The fact that ministers are starting to have conversations about the fact that they appreciate the public are genuinely upset at the revelation that water companies are dumping, let's be honest, shit in our rivers and our sea. It seems to have come as a bit of an aberration to them. But what we need to keep acutely aware of is the sewage issue is a significant one. It's probably the bigger one from a marine perspective. But actually, when you look at the holistically, agricultural pollution is probably a bigger polluter than sewage is. So whilst it's getting the headlines, it's a nuanced subject, and the work that we do to fight on various fronts there has impacts right the way through the freshwater and saltwater environment. Yeah,
absolutely. And mentioning Steve, as you did, that brings me on to our second question, which is from Jason Gillespie, who is here this evening with us. And Jason would like to raise the issue of, with the chart program that's been going on, the small scientific program, catch and release program that we've been running with, well, Steve has been running in the southwest this year. As we move forward, how can we involve private recreational anglers in that program, and expand that program out and more widely as we move into 2022 and beyond?
I'm not sure what I can say on this, or I'll probably go with what I normally do, which is say it anyway and then apologise afterwards if I've said anything I shouldn't do, Stuart. But to Jason's question, I mean, from speaking to Steve and the DEFRA officials, I think there was a big battle to get chart to where we did, and once the success came through with it, lots of people wanted their fingerprints on it and to be involved. But the plan to roll out chart 2 and beyond has a huge opportunity. There's absolutely no point in investing what we all have to then stop. So I think the desire would be to expand in terms of geographical range and vessels, and bring in private recreational boats to operate in the programme moving forward as a sort of chart 2 element, if you like, because I think the shared vision is those chart skippers who have learned and developed so much over the last year and have got incredibly good. When you look at the mortality rates, they're phenomenal. Look at the skill and the capture. It's a world-class fishery. For those skippers to progress on, and there are some challenges around that, but that we're not quite sure on around licensing, I think. But then if they can progress on, is bring through a new set of skippers as almost a pipeline so that we can develop and build and benefit from this. So there are some challenges. I mean, I'm not going to go into those specifically, but yeah, private recreational craft are in our consideration as we move into the next phase. I apologise, Stuart, if I've said anything I shouldn't do, or if Stephen will shout at me in the future for saying anything. It's probably his news to share, but it's certainly in the next stage of the process that we're discussing with CFAS and DEFRA.
Yeah, no, that's right, Jamie, and it is an intent, as you said. There's, unfortunately, working with CFAS and DEFRA, there's quite a lot of bureaucracy and there's quite a few hoops we've still got to jump through, and we're working hard to do that. Steve and I only yesterday were actually briefing all the Cornish MPs on the success of chart this year and seeking to get their support for chart 2022, and starting to develop that recreational fishery alongside. There's a long way to go. So what I'd say, Jason, is keep in touch. You know, keep an eye on the news. As soon as the opportunity is available, you know, we'll be making sure we talk about it loudly and clearly. So yeah, just keep in touch with it, Jason, and we'll let you know as soon as the opportunity is available. Really. That brings me on to the next question, which is from John May. In fact, John's submitted 2 questions, so we'll sort of deal with them one at a time, I think, because they're quite different questions. But just so people don't know, John has been an Angling Trust member for years. He's been a member of the Devon and Severn IFCA, but has also been an absolute star and stalwart in leading some of the objections against the Hinkley Point C power station, not so much for the power station itself, but because of the cooling system, which is a huge set of tunnels going out into the middle of the Bristol Channel, going to suck in millions of gallons of water to cool this power station, and in the process potentially kill millions of fish. So John has been really leading the fight against that element of the power station, and doing a fantastic job in making sure that fish and our marine environment is a key consideration. But it's John's role, as well as having been on the IFCA, that he's got a question about, which is how can the Angling Trust support getting better representation on our IFCAs, to make sure that, you know, sea angling has a good voice, and sea anglers are represented on the IFCA committees. I
think there's a couple of IFCA representatives on I can't see the list, but I think there's a couple on here now. And
yeah,
I'll hand over, if you'll allow me, to Nevin on this point, because Nevin's really driven this. But one of the things that I've been keen, I touched on restructuring the organisation. Fishing, angling, as I should call it in this forum, is built as a sport on the time of volunteers. Fundamentally, they're the absolute lifeblood of the sport, whether it's in participation, whether it's in enforcement, whether it's in coaching. Volunteers make this sport, and the time commitment around being involved with the IFCAs I know is considerable, but at the same time, what we've tried to do through our functions and all of the Angling Trust directors, all of the Fish Legal Committee, all of them are volunteers. They all give up their time for free to support that. And so what we've done is set up almost a feeder structure into that advisory board for the regions. And so if you take freshwater, we've done that through discipline. So there's a participation group that now oversee the work that we're doing in both saltwater and freshwater competitions. There's exactly the same, covering all three disciplines. Campaigns, we've actually split. So we have a specific group that, well, there's David Curtis, a specific group that advise around policy issues across the country with the Marine Advisory Group. And these are passionate individuals who give their time for free to support the work that we do, inform the work we do, and provide the bullets for us to fire where relevant. So on the IFCA subject, I've now got regular meetings set up, which I've had for a while, with the Association of IFCA's chief exec, who's been very open to discussing certain areas, memorandums of understanding, and I think Les might be on the call. Les has been involved. Tim, I think I saw from Sussex, has been involved in a couple of them. The key element there is looking at best practice, where recreational sea angling has a solid voice, where it can really speak for its local community, and there's that transparency of communication across the region, and then ensuring that we provide a voice. Now, the IFCAs don't want Angling Trust staff sitting on them. They want local stakeholders. And so the work that Nevin's doing to re-engage the regions in a way that we probably haven't done for a number of years, for me, is crucial to us understanding those individual issues in individual areas, and then being able to leverage the right support from a policy perspective to support those local arguments and those local challenges with robust science, with credible examples, and with the full support of the Angling Trust behind those individuals, so who might not be fully fledged staff members, but have our support and provide recreational sea anglers with a voice. So Nevin, tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing, because I think it's fundamental to where we're trying to go on this one.
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. But I mean, the first thing I'd say is really to reiterate John's point, which is we desperately need anglers to get involved with the local IFCAs, and there are adverts out currently for people to get involved. But we've very much looked at, with our regional voluntary group, which we set up recently, to have that re-engagement. We are taking along the best practice that will come out of our current marine regions that are primarily survived in the south of the country. But we recognise that anglers on the ground across the country need to be represented. And just as importantly, because of the work we've done with the engagement with the IFCAs generally, but also building those relationships through things like the forums last year, but also getting to know the individual fishery conservation officers that have got angling interests. And I noticed that Katie from Northumberland is on the call tonight. Building links with people such as her are really important for us. And I'm sort of saying it on her behalf, but she wants to know who the local anglers are, who the local angling clubs are, and getting involved with that. But we haven't had that network, national network of anglers on the ground representing the issues they've got. In an ideal world, what we'd love to get down to is in the next few years is to actually have representation of voluntary groups in each of our areas, and we've picked up a sort of geographic structure that roughly mirrors the IFCAs, because it made it a manageable group. But just to give some perspective around that, we've also included the Midlands in that, because we know there's a lot of sea anglers that are involved in the Midlands who fish all over the country, but they've got a voice as well. So we've got a Midlands rep that sits on that group. but just as importantly, Jamie, you mentioned earlier on about the wider roles of participation competitions. We've got people within our Angling Trust participation and competitions team sitting on that group, interacting, and only in the last few weeks I've been making those contacts with the individual IFCAs to ensure then that our regional groups have actually got a foothold in. But the Marine Advisory Group, that used to be called the Conservation Access Group, was very much picking up the big strategic issues and working with us on those issues. But we recognise that anglers on the ground, clubs on the ground, need to have a mechanism to feed in, and not least because of the things you mentioned earlier on. We've got the fishery and seafood scheme. There are going to be opportunities coming up, and in a way perhaps that we've not had in angling, and certainly in sea angling in recent years. And the way to do that is to work together with that. And I know that with the conversations that I've been having with chief officers and others from the IFCAs, that they're really keen to engage with us on that, and that can only be good for us going forward. There's going to be challenges, and I'm sure there'll be things that we will have honest discussions about, but they recognise, I know, the importance of the Fisheries Act, and that sea angling is now a stakeholder and represented in that legislation, and that there is now a real way for us to be heard, and bringing that group on the ground together, and then hopefully developing into individual groups within each of call it roughly the IFCA areas, but that would mirror then the work that we've done in the south of England, where we've got the Sussex, Wyvern and the Wessex regions, and building upon that is huge for us in terms of building networks, and interacting with those agencies are going to be so important as we go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So I would just reiterate at the end there, just to say that actually the MMO who manage the committee appointments on these IFCAs is advertising for members to join IFCAs, and if you are interested, I would really encourage you to join. If you want to talk about what will it entail and what will involve, by all means get in touch. Not only has John, who asked the question, been a recent member, we've got Les Weller, who's a passionate sea angler and chair of the Northumberland IFCA, and we've got Kev Woodcock also on this call, who's an IFCA committee member too. So we can give you some information about what it involves, what it entails if you're interested. But I can't reiterate enough, the more sea angling representatives we can get on the IFCAs, the more we can help them fulfill their duty, which is about protecting our marine stocks and balancing the needs of different stakeholders in the marine environment. So, yeah, I would really stress that. I'll move on to the next question from John, which is, how can the Angling Trust convince the recreational sea angling community that we need to have a joined up voice to make any difference in the world? And maybe rather controversially, one way might be to have a sea angling license. I wondered if you wanted to respond to that, Jamie.
Yeah, happy to. We wouldn't license it. And I mean, you could volunteer. The thing is, if anglers wanted to, you could almost voluntary license by joining a body, for example, us or any other body, and then holding that body to account to ring fence the resource that they were investing and see it reinvested. If you're looking at government government licensing, that's not our decision. We could argue for or against it. There are pros and cons, as I understand it, either way. I think sea angling has struggled to have the recognition it deserves, and part of that is because it's very difficult to quantify. I think I'd probably focus on the first part of the question because it's more the part that I can control, which is I can't speak too much on what's gone before, only my observation as a lifelong angler, but I think we are starting to move. Someone described it as turning an oil tank around with the sort of perception and the work that the trust are doing. And I think we are starting to galvanise the community of anglers as a whole, and in itself, to an extent, just starting to turn a couple of heads in recreational sea angling, because we're putting our commitment and our resource and our money where our mouth is, because we're investing time and effort in big issues that impact recreational sea anglers. And yes, there are steps to do it. I mean, Stuart, you Martin, Hannah, sitting on the calls that you've sat on with DEFRA officials, I don't think anyone could be more vociferous in fighting the cause of recreational sea anglers on those calls with key stakeholders who are making policy and being absolutely clear around the value and the role of recreational sea angling, not at the detriment of the commercial sector, but the commercial sector needs to recognise that it's enshrined in law now in the Fisheries Act that recreational sea angling is a stakeholder. And that may not have been the case for however long. That may not have been the case had we not pushed that issue and fought that issue so hard. But that is written in law now. And so it's our job to drive that through. And the more we do that, the more we turn those words on paper into action, into resource, into programs that benefit local communities, into development of bylaws that actually you can see the influence of the recreational sector on them to benefit local coastal communities. And we know clearly that the impact and the value that recreational sea angling has to local communities, we just haven't had the level of lobby or voice that others have. The more we do that, the more I think you'll see that slight turn or that slight focus from some in the recreational sea angling sector kind of turn to a little bit more and a little bit more understanding and commitment. And it was interesting to see over Christmas, I got sent a couple of links of charter boat skippers joining the Angling Trust, and I saw a really nice comment that says that if we can't support them, how can we expect them to be there for us when we need them? And I thought that was a really nicely put sentiment from someone who I don't know who the individual was. I had no connection with them, but I think you're starting to see an organisation that's listening, is clearly listening from the basis that we're here, that's putting action forward, that's gaining results. And for me, that's the only way to galvanise the sector is give it a focal point that can make a difference. And from my perspective, I think we've done quite a lot through the When We Fish Again campaign, through the work that we've done through the Fisheries Act, through the ongoing challenge of developing the FAST scheme in the face of some pretty strong opposition, that our voice is being heard. And as recreational sea anglers see that, I think they're more likely to fall behind an organisation and say, you know what, I can see it's going in the right direction. And I'd say, Stuart, there's a degree of a similarity, albeit there's a longer journey with some of the coarse angling fraternity who recreational sea anglers may look at maybe fairly and say you've had it good. And coarse and game fraternity, if you like, through the work that the Angling Trust has done. But even those communities are starting to say to us, look, I've really seen you step up on these issues and the big things that matter to us. That's where Nevin's point's absolutely right. We need that local engagement and understanding of the key issues and how we can help make a difference. And if we understand that, I think we're starting to build a bit of a portfolio and a testimonial base of how we can make a difference. And yeah, from most of the work that we've done in that respect is around campaigning, the political, the lobby and the advocacy. But you'll start to see a lot more in terms of participation events at grassroots. And as we start to work with the right partners to build the right competitions, you'll see a wholehearted commitment through the DNA of the organisation to angling in all its guises, and that's what we should be.
Yep, great. Thanks, Jamie. I've got two more questions that have come in, and then I want to open up the floor to Hannah and some of the great comments that are coming in on the chat. But this is a question. This is moving us on actually to another bill that's in Parliament at the moment, which is causing some concern. So this is a question from Aldo, and I apologise if I mispronounce your surname, Aldo, but it's Azarati. So Aldo Azarati is asking about the Animal Welfare Sentience Bill, which is currently going through Parliament. and that the bill could be hijacked by anti-angling lobbyists to prove fish feel pain. What is the Angling Trust doing about this as it relates to both freshwater and saltwater? Do you want me to answer that, or are you happy to take that one?
Well, you can come in if I miss anything or get anything wrong, Stuart. But I was out fishing with Martin Salter, actually, and a couple of volunteers when the whole story broke around the latest Mrs. Johnson's support of an ill-advised piece of non-credible research around sea angling. And immediately I said to Martin, we need to squash this, that it's just simply not acceptable that this is pushing through. So that same day I wrote to Boris Johnson on the subject. We received response to George Eustice. We did the same thing. The key element here, and we've continued, it's not enough just to write the letter, we've continued to beat the drum, is that on the panels and the groups that are advising ministers on this matter, we have to have fishery specialists and recreational sea anglers involved and engaged to make sure that doesn't happen, to put forward the credible case. When you go back to 2005, I think, Stuart, and if I get this right, when Ben Bradshaw put forward the last act of this ilk, then fishing fell outside of it, for good reason, because there was evidence presented to him around why it shouldn't fall under the restrictions they're trying to place in certain areas. And yeah, for us, we're acutely aware of it. We've got the strongest people we can on it, and I think we're pretty focused on where we've got to have an influence, and it's got to be around making sure that advice, that hijack advice, as Aldo touches upon, doesn't reach ministers in any credible way. And if it's pushed towards them, that we've got input into those advisory areas, that we're working to lobby and support the ministers making those decisions as we build those relationships. It's why the all-party group's so important, and I never gave heedance to why it was so important beforehand. But having that voice into government, into parliament, the influence to say, look at this, listen to this, that's how we'll head that off, Aldo, is being incredibly proactive. If I'm honest, the biggest barrier to being able to do that effectively is resource. You look at some of the other pressures that those ministers are under, and they are so much better resourced than us. We punch far more than our weight for the resource we've got, and if we had further resource, you'd be able to put people full time on this. As you know, with the team you've got, Stuart, we're spread pretty thin, but yeah. But I think we're doing a very proactive job in that area, influencing the right people. But that's my key answer to Aldo, is that we've got to get recreational representation with credible evidence into those advisory groups.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jamie. And just for everybody's benefit, so this bill, it's a very small bill. What it's seeking to do is set up, as you've mentioned, an independent advisory panel that will look at government policy and whether government policy impacts on sentience, as they describe it, for various animals. That bill has just gone into what's called the committee stage in the House of Commons. So we're monitoring it very closely, and what other people are saying about it. But we've also had direct conversations with the minister responsible for that bill, who is Richard Benyon, about doing exactly that, making sure that when this committee is formed, it has fisheries expertise on this committee, so that they can counter some of these more ridiculous and ludicrous claims that some of the animal rights people try and promote. We're even at the stage where we're even helping to suggest and identify potential individuals for that committee. So, Aldo, it's definitely a live issue for us, and something that, you know, we will keep working on. So that brings me to the last question from the pre-submitted ones, which is from Barry Luxton, who said he couldn't be with us this evening. But he said he'd like to see lobbying by the Angling Trust to get the government to abandon the pointless sea anglers take ban for bass on 2 fish and lobby the government about the wasteful commercial bycatch around this issue. Now, it's good that David Curtis has just joined us, because our partners at the Bass campaign have actually launched a campaign on this today about the really disappointing fisheries opportunities or fisheries options work that was done in December. So I don't know if you want to make some comments, and then I don't know if David Curtis also wants to come in on this question.
I'm very happy for David to come in. I mean, much of the work predates my tenure, Stuart, but I take issue with the fact that the work that the recreational sea angling sector has done has been pointless. I mean, you're starting to see a recovery in bass stocks. No one wants to see the commercial exploitation that we've seen in the past week, or the scenes we've seen there, and David will be able to talk about the outrage in that respect, and the focus we've got to have on the resource that we've got in terms of fish stocks. But I personally, from my view, from the outside looking in, I take issue with the fact that the work has been pointless, because I think the bass fisheries have developed, and I think some of the challenges we've got with some of the IFCA regions are around those juvenile stocks, and the exploitation of those juvenile stocks is something that I think we can all agree we wouldn't support, because you need that pipeline of fish growing through to create the fish that David and his members want to fish for. But David, happy to give way on this, because I know most of the work was done sort of before my tenure on this subject.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the bag limit is a tricky one, and it's something that we do sort of get criticised sort of for. There are some sort of sea anglers out there who will sort of maintain that it's our fault that there's a bag limit. But I think what you have to remember is that back in 2015, the state of the stock was a complete emergency situation. I mean, the EU sort of Commission sort of said it's an environmental disaster and we don't know kind of how to stop it. We sort of came in and we made it sort of clear to the politicians that there were sort of sea anglers out there who, you know, very much wanted sort of the stock protected, and that it wasn't acceptable for fishery ministers just to keep allowing kind of fishing pressure to carry on at a level that was going to destroy the stock. Back in 2015, ICES was saying that there should be a complete moratorium on all bass fishing. So I mean, that's kind of the context. So you know, I think the bag limit, it was probably inevitable that the fishery managers would bring a bag limit in alongside measures for commercials. It wasn't very welcome. It sort of felt very unfair that we were essentially having to sort of pay the price for some commercial overfishing that was, you know, very obvious, and that the fishery managers should have stepped in well before. You know, but we have a bag limit at 3. It started off as 3 fish. I think we sort of felt that was proportionate. It was then sort of cut to 1 fish, which we certainly objected very sort of strongly to. At one point, it was reduced to 0 fish as a result of some very sort of spurious numbers that were sort of provided by ICES. You know, I think we did a fantastic job there. You know, we worked really hard, collaboratively, in a sort of good, positive way with ICES. We went over to Copenhagen and we sort of sat in on their sort of bass workshops, and as a result, we were able to get some of those sort of numbers sort of looked at again, get some more sort of sensible numbers for the recreational sea angling take, and we then used that to create political pressure to get the 0 fish bag limit reversed in an incredibly short space of time. It was only in for something like eight months. I mean, to get something like that done in sort of the world of fishery management is you know, nothing short of incredible. So yeah, we carried on campaigning. We still thought that the the one fish wasn't sufficient, it's 2 fish. We're campaigning now for 3 fish to 10 months. I mean, the 10 months we think is an absolute must because it puts us onto a par with the commercial fishing season. There's no reason why we should be discriminated, against, why we should accept that. We shouldn't. So I think that's key. 3 fish. Some people are saying, why on earth do you need 3 fish? Surely nobody sort of needs to be able to take more than sort of 2 fish. And it's a difficult one. It's a judgment call. I mean, we think that it's a completely sustainable ask. It's completely compatible with the IC's advice on the total recommended catch. And also, there's a bit of a historic thing here. Sea anglers used to be the main participants in the fishery, and that's kind of where it's gone wrong. Commercial fishing has been allowed to grow to unsustainable levels, and we kind of have to reverse that. So a little bit of it is sort of sea angler rights. It's sort of asserting our place in the bass fishery and saying, look, we are the most, we're the biggest, most valuable stakeholder in this sort of fishery. We need that to be sort of reflected in our catch limits. Anyway, I think that's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
No, thanks, David. That was great. Thank you very much. That's exhausted the questions we had in advance. So I'm now going to open the floor to Hannah. There's been some really quite good chats going on while we've been talking. So Hannah, do you want to both maybe pull out some of the questions, but also maybe some of the comments that we've had, which could help to open up further discussion? So over to you, Hannah.
No problem. Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, we've had some fantastic comments and questions that have come in. So the first one is in relation to fisheries management plans. So we were successful in obtaining government funding to support our work with fisheries management plans going forward, which will be a very important process over sort of the next 3 to 5 years, outlining what fisheries management in England is going to look like. And Michael asks, can you please clarify the role of the recent appointment of someone to work on fisheries management plans? Is this a full-time appointment? What do you think the challenges might be? So I don't know, Jamie, whether you want me to take this, and also Stuart, since we worked on this proposal.
Yeah, you carry on, Hannah. This was your work.
Yeah. By all means, you lead on this one, Hannah.
No problem. So thanks for your question, Michael. So we were very fortunate to partner with BASS, so David Curtis, who you've just seen on the screen there, who they supplied match funding for this particular piece of work. So thank you so much to them for doing so. And we've appointed Dr. Simon Thomas, who is both an angler and a very well-respected scientist, to work on fisheries management plans. And how we see this is kind of the initial scoping, I suppose, of fisheries management plans going forward. So as I just mentioned, it's quite a long process and we're right at the beginning of that one. We've got a lot of cultural changes and challenges ahead in terms of how government officials think towards recreational sea fishing. So that's kind of one of the biggest challenges, I would say. So we're hoping to kind of get ahead of the curve on this one with the support from Simon, and essentially provide our vision for what we think fisheries management plans should look like in England, for the benefit of recreational sea anglers, but also for the benefit of other stakeholders. So we'll be doing that by producing a report that will be publicly available once it's complete, and it'll have case studies throughout, looking at the socio-economic value of things like the bass fishery, for example, and the great work Steve's been doing with Chart. So I suppose that's kind of a summary of where we are with that now, without being too dry about it. But I hope that answers your question. I don't know if, Stuart, you have any additional comments at this stage.
No, I think you summed it up really well there, Hannah. The couple of comments I would make, Michael, is you asked, is it a full-time post? Unfortunately, it's not. We've only got funding through to the end of March for this, so this is the first stage, but we will be providing more, or applying, I think, for more funding to continue to work on to do our work on fisheries management plans, because as Hannah has said, they're going to be very complex, very challenging. for those of you who are interested, it's almost started now with a plan called the Joint Fisheries Statement that's just come out from government, which is looking at how the 4 devolved countries are going to sort of set the framework for fisheries management in the future. There's a consultation on that that's open till April that we're now working on. Hannah and I are currently wading through all 84 pages of the consultation document. I have to say our initial response is it's disappointing from a recreational fishing point of view. There's work to be done. So we will be doing that, doing a lot of publicity, but also coming to you guys and saying, here's some points you might want to make in response to that consultation. So keep an eye on that. That will come out sort of end of February, beginning of March. Consultation is open till early April. So hopefully that helps, Michael.
Okay. Is it 5 days a week?
No, it's Hannah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Michael, if I can just add here, I mean, Hannah and Stuart led on this. Let's not say that word. The ridiculous situation we were in with FAS was that there was a cliff edge in the funding. So firstly, there was, I think it's fair to say, resistance to recreational sea angling receiving anything. Hannah's fought an incredible fight and needed some support, I think, for us to really make a fuss around this. But secondly, in the way that funding works in this area, Michael, they made this unilateral decision that funding had to be applied for, gains, and the work done and delivered within the calendar year. Now, when you take, the financial year, so up to the 31st of March. Now, when you take the fact that actually they set this odds theory of change, well, the theory of change is fine, but this odds hoops that recreational sea angling had to jump through that others didn't, you got to a point whereby it was really impractical for the first year to put anything tangible together on a long-term plan. So I think Hannah's done a sterling job in trying to pull together some programs that we could get through FAS 1, and I was involved, myself and Stuart and Martin and Hannah were involved in the meeting with Victoria Prentice, the fisheries minister, and her team, where I think it's fair to say she heard our concerns, Stuart, and acknowledged them and set follow-up meetings up with both the MMO and our DEFRA officials. The point that we've made, Michael, is that if you're going to build a world-class recreational sea fishery, and I saw the question earlier around stocks, you've got to build a series of different things in the long term. And having 3-month or 4-month cliff edge funding decisions is never going to support that aspiration. You need a longer term holistic view that you build into. Those conversations are ongoing. I think they've been acknowledged that the FAS scheme is not necessarily in its first iteration fit for purpose for what we're trying to do with it. Hannah's probably saying, yeah, and more. And so we're trying to influence policymakers and officials who, if we're completely honest, have spent a lot of time working with the commercial sector rather than the recreational one. It's a real battle in certain areas. But from my point of view, Michael, we've been absolutely clear. Multi-year funding is the way forward. Sustainable programs that work towards those shared objectives are where we have to be. And FAS 2 and beyond has to acknowledge that it is the area that we've driven. So I believe 5-day-a-week post up until the end of March, and we're already working through bids for FAS 2 with DEFRA officials to make sure that we can move seamlessly into that process.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm conscious we've only got 10 minutes. I don't know, Jamie, if you want to run on a little bit, or if everybody's happy to stay on for a further 10 minutes. And we can look at a couple more questions here. And I think
there's one about how many members we've got, Stuart. There's one about how many members we've got. I saw earlier flash up, which I can answer.
Yeah, go on then. That would be good.
We're at it's pitifully low when you consider how many people go fishing, but we pushed over 20,000 for the first time last year. So we're up in the kind of 20 to 21,000 individual full paying members. You can kind of add juniors onto it who don't pay, which adds another couple of thousand. And then when you look at clubs and fisheries, you're about 2,500 of those. So in that respect, there's a lot of people who are, I think Nevin asked the question, are you a member? And people say, yes, I'm a member of a club who's a member. That doesn't actually make you a member. It just means your club's a member and benefits from various offerings that the Angling Trust have. But yeah, we grew quite considerably in the last year, which is a good thing. And or the last financial year, and this year we've sustained that growth, which is brilliant to see. So yeah, on the way up, but I think we'd all have slightly larger aspirations.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I could just ask the next question, I suppose I've just noticed one that's kind of in relation to politics, and obviously whilst we're on that subject, but we're obviously driving quite hard in some aspects on citizen science right now. And one question asks, there's a lot of comment by commercials and DEFRA regarding the lack of data for recreational sea angling. How can you ensure the information from the Sea Angling Diary doesn't work against recreational sea angling? Now, I don't know whether Jamie or Stuart you want to start, but
I get the sense you might want to start, Hannah. So do you want to lead us in?
Yeah, I would say I completely understand people's hesitancy around data, but what I would say is that data is very important. It's one of the things that keeps coming up time and time again in terms of DEFRA meetings, and it's kind of put forward as an obstacle for us not having a seat at the table. So what I would say is that although I understand hesitancy to provide data, I would say it's not always the enemy. And it can actually work in strong favour of RSA, particularly when we're looking at things like developing the socioeconomic case for the sport. That's very, very important. And fisheries managers like to manage things. So if you let them know that you're there, you have a voice, not necessarily what your impact is, that they will listen to you. So I think it's a very important aspect of this. But I do acknowledge hesitancy, and it's important to proceed with caution in terms of where we're providing that data.
Oh, I agree, Hannah. Policymakers are generally risk averse.
Yeah.
So generally, if you can prove to a policymaker that something has worked somewhere else and here's the evidence to support it, they are more willing to implement policy that can be proved because they mitigate their risk. And I know you've argued till you're blue in the face over people pushing back evidence saying it doesn't apply here, it doesn't apply there, or you haven't done that study here or there. As you said, they're sharks, they're the same species. Why would they behave any differently here or there or anywhere? Actually, we've got to work more closely. It's one of the key areas with the Angling Trust being part of the European Anglers Alliance, I think, with the links we've got through different work that we do across the world, using evidence there. And you're absolutely right. If we can, you're sitting at these tables on behalf of the recreational sea angling sector, along with Stuart and Martin and myself and Nevin. If people are pushing back at us saying you haven't got evidence to support that, that's always the first step. If you think about objection handling, the moment you disarm that, then they haven't got a place to go. So I completely understand the concern and the question and the tone of it, completely understand it. But I think what we've got to acknowledge is evidence we're not rich with it. We haven't got huge amounts of it. We need to form evidence that supports our arguments and actually make the robust arguments that you as a scientist, Hannah, know will increase our credibility. The fact that we're at that table now, we're having that discussion, we're able to influence, it's one of the key tools we need, because we can all make an argument, form an argument on what we think we know. If we've got evidence to support that, it disarms your opposition. So I think that would be whilst I've got a degree of misgiving that I understand as well, we need to progress in the same way that we do, and that's not simply related to sea angling. It's the same if you look at salmon examples, Stuart, and some of the work we're doing there with migratory species. The more evidence we've got, the more credibly we can put forward the arguments that we know and our community know who are on the ground seeing the impacts will make a difference.
I agree, and I think Hannah's also, Jamie, being a little bit modest in that she's she's been instrumental in the formation of a group of organisations, including 2 universities, called the Shark Hub, which is actually there as well, really trying to pull that data through, because actually it's anglers who have often got, through things like the Shark Club of Great Britain, who have got, you know, a huge amount of data that we need to be able to identify and use. And I noticed that you know, Michael Watts has just put a comment up about having 20 years of match card data from North Norfolk. Michael, we will follow up with you on that, because, you know, that sort of data and getting it through and then using it in policy development and for political pressure is really important. And I think hopefully next week we will be publishing again that Hannah has been working on, which is a socio-economic review, really setting out the benefits of recreational sea angling in terms of its economic contribution, in terms of its social contribution. So it is also about us using that data to really underpin the arguments that we're making that are very important. Hannah, back to you. For other questions.
Yeah, thank you both. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. So Greg's asked, what role do you see for the AT in tackling ecosystem damage, for example, that's caused by overfishing and damaging commercial practices, like beam trawling, for example, and dredging? Where do you see us in that?
Do you want me to come in on that one?
You can. If you
can start. Yeah.
I'm happy to say things as well. Yeah.
Greg, I think that I'll make a more general point rather than specific, if that's okay. I think we're there to represent the recreational sector and fire the bullets. Is my view. Is we are not claiming to be absolute experts on every subject, but we've built a degree of credibility. I think a strong degree of credibility in the fact that when we make an argument, we're not doing so frivolously, we're doing so with solid grounds, and our voices are being heard. And I've seen a change in less than 2 years involved, from the speed of response, the nature of response that we get from ministers, the fact that virtually every response I now get is from the minister themselves rather than a civil servant. Stuart, I think you'll be conscious of in your previous line of work is probably a case in point of elevating our perception. And for me, Greg, it's similar again around forming the data, understanding the argument we're trying to make, whether we can prove it or otherwise, and actually positioning that and working with the right partner who is impacted as a stakeholder to make sure that it's not simply us alone making this statement, it's us plus the impacted party. It's what we see time and time again from the work we do through Fish Legal, is we involve the local impacted party. We work with them on a community basis because we are a collective angling community. And so where there are impacts to a local area or a series of impacts across different IFCA areas or across different regions that are consistent, we need to pull that argument together. And then I think the key point, Greg, is we need to propose tangible solutions. The amount of times in my short tenure that I've said to Stuart or Hannah, and they've probably got fed up with hearing this, is the ministers don't want to hear what the problem is. They want to understand what the solution is for them to put it right. And the more we can give them tangible solutions that will position them positively, particularly alongside statements they've made publicly or acts they've signed, that's where I think our role is giving solutions of how they can address the problem and put a more positive policy in place. So that's probably my answer, Greg, but I'm sure Hannah and Stuart will have something to add.
Would you like to go first, Stuart?
No, by all means, Hannah, you go first.
Yeah, I suppose my response would be, I mean, we're just going through the kind of business plan for the Angling Trust at the moment, and the kind of the core of it is fighting for the future of fish and fishing. So, of course, the environments in which fish live are very important to us. I think, as Jamie's raised previously, resourcing is quite a huge problem for us. We are quite a small team in campaigns at the moment. So it's really directing where those priorities are. But things that we've been looking at in the past, for the future, are things like ecosystem habitat restoration. So, for example, seagrass meadows, potentially working with the Institute of Fisheries Management to really make sure that at that really small beginning larval stages of their life at recruitment, that we have that good kind of life cycle stage, that you know, you can't have thriving sea bass stocks if there's no habitat for their nursery areas. And we've seen sort of 95% reduction in seagrass meadows here in England over the last couple of decades. So I think that's really important as well, but it's just navigating where our priorities are and whether that's something for us or whether it's for us to work in partnership with other organisations in order to deliver that. But what I will say is, like, for another example of areas where we've been really successful with this is the nearshore trawling bylaw down in Sussex that anglers were really instrumental in delivering. And so that's just one example of where we have been able to kind of push local angler effort for conservation. And we've been very successful at that. So hopefully we can have more of that in the future.
I think as well, I would just add a couple of sort of things to that as well very quickly, and then we'll take one more question, I think. And that is we're also working really hard to develop this narrative that actually anglers are the guardians of a lot of these environments. They're passionate about these environments, not only because it's where our fish are, but because we have an intimate connection with a lot of these environments, much closer than a lot of people, including a lot of people who would claim to be conservationists, have. And we're really trying to bring that through to position ourselves as really, you know, part of the solution with a lot of these things. And that includes, you know, some of the policy work that's happening at the moment. So like the highly protected marine areas, you know, Hannah and I are pushing very hard on some of that issues, making sure not only do we get this protection, but that we get it in a way that doesn't penalise recreational sea angling, because we're not the ones who are doing the damage a lot of this time. Or that where if we do have to accept things like no take zones in elements of them, we're building buffer zones around them, so that as you get this spill out effect, you know, we need that to be available to recreational sea anglers before, you know, a trawler comes through and sucks up the whole thing. So it's areas like that. And on the broader policy area, part of the fisheries management plans that we've been talking about earlier, you know, it's about making sure that there's different approaches to how you're managing those fish stocks. So particularly the mixed stocks, you know, taking an ecosystem approach to managing those stocks is hugely important, not just a maximum sustainable yield approach, for example. So it's about trying to put those into these conversations and these policy developments too. So Hannah, I think we've got time for one more question, and then I think we'll have to call this evening to a close. So one last question, and I'm sorry, I know there's a couple of hands up, probably won't get time to get to them this evening. But those questions we can't answer, we'll look to get back to you on those as well. So
just while Hannah's reading that, I noticed Chris Douce has raised the question, and anyone who hasn't checked out the Joy of, I think it's Joy of Angling, I hope it's Joy of Angling, Chris, the YouTube channel, it's absolutely brilliant for Chris and his girls. So yeah, glad Chris could join us. And Nevin's given you an answer there, Chris. It is an increase, but it's really difficult to answer that question because, Chris, I know you're an all-rounder, I'm an all-rounder. I'd probably say I'm a coarse angler who's interested in sea fishing, recreational sea angling, sorry. And in that respect, I count in Nevin's stat there. So it's quite a difficult one to completely dissect, but it is growing. You'll see that from the engagement in these areas from some of the members who have publicly joined us. It's moving in the right direction, but not as quickly as I think any of us would like.
Well, thanks, Jamie. So I've just seen one question from Neil in relation to stocks, to the marine stocks in the environment, and I'm hoping that we've addressed that in our last response there, Neil. But if you need any further clarification, please feel free to send it through. But the last question is from Brian, and he's asked, when are the AT going to provide funding for national marine teams? I'm constantly being asked this.
Stuart, do you want to? I'm
assuming he means competition teams on that.
Oh, okay.
I would say so as well. Yeah.
I'll answer that then if that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So Brian, this year, this has been a subject quite close to my heart across all disciplines. We received no funding from UK Sport. The funding that we received from Sport England, none of it is permitted to be used for elite participation. So we're not allowed to use a penny of it, of government money, to support our national teams. So we get nothing from UK Sport, nothing from Sport England for elite participation. There are routes for us to go back in. We've made an argument to UK Sport that they've got an Every Sport Matters campaign, and so on that basis, if your chosen sport, they're not supporting you in elite participation, are they really delivering on their stated objective? I don't believe they are, but that's a longer term burner. For us, what we're trying to do at the moment, we made financial contribution to every England team that travelled in the last financial year, sorry. And again, in the budget that we're forming at the moment for next year, my proposal to the board is going to have resource going to support each of those teams. Now, you'll be aware there's somewhere between 33 and 36 international teams. And if you travel internationally abroad, the average spend of those teams total is, if you work off a basis of it being it's about £1,300 per head is the kind of average spend across all of those teams in an average year, from the research we've got. So if you take all of those teams and equate it up, you're talking about £500,000, give or take, to send all of our teams fully covered. Now, that's not as bad as some other sports. Lacrosse gave the example that it's £1.4 million to send the representative lacrosse teams. And they don't get a penny either. So we're not alone in this. The intention that I've got and the process that I'm following with the competitions team is develop the proposition around Team England. The focus area that I've got at the start is around talent pathways and trying to get those funded and supported. And then the intention is, as we grow membership, if we can continue to grow, and particularly as we develop the competitions that we're running, is try and mirror to an extent what we do with Team England fly fishing in the marine environment, which is where we run competitions or qualifiers. We ring fence any surplus beyond the direct cost. That doesn't mean the cost of the staff. That means direct cost of the competition and prizes, etc. Pools are obviously sacrosanct. And then we commit to reinvesting that back into the discipline. So we've done it for a long time with Team England fly fishing. With the course world, it's worked slightly differently because we've had more commercial sponsors. So we've been able to have teams where commercial sponsors have backed them to go and travel and cover their costs. And we're seeing growth in that again as the reputation and focus of sea angling grows. But to be perfectly honest, Brian, we're never going to be able to do it from public funds. The gap is going to be too great for us to do it directly from membership funds. And it democratically, I think it's not an area that enough of our members want us to cover and invest £500,000 in, which we haven't got lying around. So from our point of view, there's still going to be the element of self-funding. But as we develop more saltwater competitions for different disciplines, we're going to try and work on that basis of reinvesting the money that we generate from them, or a proportion of that money that acts as a sort of surplus, directly into those international teams. So there's something tangible, and be really transparent about every team, where that money's going, how it's being resourced and funded. So there's no silver bullet that I've discovered so far. If I find an INEOS equivalent for cycling that have a passion for all forms of angling, I'll be the first person jumping up and down, delighted to be able to invest more money in the international teams. And you may have seen the intentions starting from the course side to try and bring large scale international competitions back to England, that by and large those really big events, I know we've held a number in different spheres, but we've probably not had them with the prominence that we should do. So it's an area that I've got a lot of personal equity invested in, Brian, and across all disciplines, I'm very keen to see it develop.
Thanks, Jamie. I see John May has got his hand up. John, if it's a very quick point, can we just open the floor to you? And then we'll, I think we'll then call it a day. So John.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, John.
Ah, good. Right. Nice to meet you. Nice. I didn't know you came from around Bristol, Jamie.
I don't come from here. I can't claim to be Bristolian, but I live in Bristol now. My wife's Bristolian.
Sorry. A couple of quick points I wanted to make. You know, I was on the IFCA for 6 years, and 5 years of that I was on the bylaw committee as well. I just want to make the point, you could, if you become a member of the IFCA on the main committee, that actually takes up 1 day a month to go along to a meeting. And the advantage there is that you get to meet the other guys there. 20 on the DS IFCA, about 12 or 14 of the members were councillors, and they all have a vote come the end of the day of the committee. There's about 35 in total, so that's a big chunk. A lot of those guys come along. For instance, up here, they didn't even know that they were fishing in that dirty water in the Bristol Channel. And they come along because the money to finance the IFCA goes through them. But that is one hell of a good opportunity for us to educate local councillors the value of the RSAs in their area. I think that'd be, that'd be worth focusing. But the point I'm making, it is not all that much time, and it's ever so interesting, and you get the opportunity to say what you want to say. The other thing,
John, could I cut across you on that one just before you make your second point? What it might be worth doing, just thinking as I go, is if Nevin was up for doing so, is maybe doing a kind of Q&A interview with you that we could push out through the next newsletter or through an upcoming newsletter, just so people understand warts and all what it means to be on an IFCA and what it means in terms of commitment. And because I bet there's people out there who'd love to do it, who are just slightly intimidated by it. That I think something like that, John, with the heritage that you've got in the area, the impact you've made, I'd love to read something like that.
I can only speak with experience with the DS IFCA. But, yes.
I think it's a brilliant idea, and a few other people in the call have indicated that they're also IFCA members, and we've got Les on the phone, so maybe we can pull together, an article with Q&As with a number of people, Jamie, because it's a really, really important sort of role, and one that could really, if we can get more sea anglers on the IFCAs, we can get the sea angling voice heard, as John said, on the general committee and through the bylaw committee. There's real opportunities there. So sorry, John, you need to make another point.
The bylaw committee was the one that took up a lot of work and a lot of time.
Yeah.
We have more meetings, we have more papers to study, all sorts of things. So that is the engine room of the IFCA, because anything they're going to vote on with relation to changes of fisheries for recreational singers, anything has to be recommended by them back to the main committee. But they do all of the work, and it usually gets rubber stamped. But that is more of a commitment. But that's just let you know. The other thing I wanted just to share with you is that I had quite a lot of meetings there where I might have been the only angler sat in there with 10, 20 commercial people.
Yeah.
And I was told, I got to these, I was quite friendly with these people. We did get a little bit agitated with each other a few times, but I was told by them, their words were that recreational sea anglers have got no chance on the bylaw making the rules because they are not joined up. We all pay money to our organisations, and our organisations are dealing with the problems before Joe Public and other people even know about them. So it speaks for itself. They knew how strong they were on all the voting and all the issues. They all paid pretty big money to belong to their organisations, and they had the results.
And John, I think you make a really good point, and we are stronger together. And the strength that we've got is there's so many of us. So if we could mobilise a small proportion or a large proportion, we've got a huge bank of resource.
Exactly.
And you've got an organisation here that I think is committed in the area. And if we could build that infrastructure that Nevin's trying to build around the regions, support those regions and make some really coherent arguments, we really have potential. It's that mobilising individuals to take action and see what you've seen. And I think I think that the other element that I've taken from what you've raised there, John, is I wonder if there's, again, Stuart, kick me under the table proverbially if I'm saying the wrong thing, if there's an ability for us to publicise almost a calendar of when these IFCA meetings are happening that are publicly open, or open to the public, sorry, I should say, that recreational sea anglers in the area can come along if they want to and attend, as you did, John. And if we could offer that sort of insight and knowledge, I bet there's anglers out there like myself who just wouldn't know where the meeting was taking place, when, and
in all honesty, you would want to know the content of that meeting that is going to be interesting to you, if you see what I mean, because it deals with all the recreational stuff. But I think they are far more open now. When I left, they were just talking in terms of televising them.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if that happens, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that, I mean, I think we could pick this up as well out of the meeting. And as you say, Jamie, I think doing an article on us, and, you know, as Les will testify, you know, we're members of the IFCO and the Association of IFCOs are really keen to get more sea angling representation on them. So, you know, I wouldn't say we're pushing at an open door entirely, but you know, the willingness is there, and the louder we can make our voice, the more benefit we're going to get.
You're right.
From this.
I was actually invited in there in the first place.
Yeah.
I was invited in there because there was pressure on from the local councillors that nobody was representing the north area of the Devon and Severn IFCA.
Yeah.
So as they wanted somebody in, and I was more than interested in going in. But that just shows the councillors, they have got a big say.
Okay, thanks, John. That's really helpful. Well, what I think I'm going to do now, if it's okay, because we've overrun by quite some time. Really, really interesting discussion, and thanks everybody for taking part. And thank you, Jamie, for coming along this evening, and for taking so many questions on such a wide and broad range of topics.
Stuart, I'm delighted, and I'm in the last day of lockdown from COVID, so I didn't have anywhere else to be honest with you. I'm not allowed to leave the house until tomorrow. But no, thank you for having me. It's I've really appreciated the engagement. Some of the questions I've seen have been great, and it's been nice to see a couple of names that I recognise there, and I hope to recognise a few more next time I'm invited back, if I'm invited back. Oh,
well, I definitely think we'll be inviting you back, Jamie. So I'm afraid we'll be putting a date in your diary probably by tomorrow morning. And I'd also like to thank Hannah, and I'd like to thank Nevin for doing all the work behind the scenes, and, you know, been supporting these forums throughout 2021. And I know we've got some exciting times ahead in 2022. And that's really up to you guys as well. You know, do please suggest to us topics that you would like to see discussed at these forums. As we said last year, you know, we did a lot on sharks. All fascinating, interesting. We're going to be talking to the National Mullet Club. I'd like to do one on bass. We could even try and get some DEFRA officials onto some of these, and you can actually talk to DEFRA officials directly yourself. But, you know, do come forward with ideas. We do actually, after this, send out a survey to you all. It only takes about 5 minutes to fill in, but that's a good way that you can suggest to us some of the topics you'd like to see us cover. So if you could return that within the next week or so, that would be great. As I said, this has been filmed this evening and recorded, so we'll be posting this on our website. So if you want to catch up on anything else and revisit, or tell your mates about what a great evening and what an interesting discussion it's been, please do. And if you've not already signed up to our Sea newsletter, do please. Again, you can do that through our website. So do sign up. It comes out on a monthly basis, and every so often we'll also send out, when there's big news, we'll send out a special. So it's a brilliant way of keeping in touch with us as to what we're all doing in order to promote sea angling across a range of different stakeholders. And so finally, again, thank you, Jamie. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Brilliant discussion, great questions. Sorry if we didn't get to answer some of your questions. We'll have a look at the comments and questions, and maybe, you know, post some further comments on the Sea Angling newspaper, on the Sea Angling website for you to have a look at. But with that, I'd like to just say thanks a lot, and good night, and have a great evening, everybody.